Good evening, and welcome to the second episode of Ireland Reports. I'm your host, Alex Sheridan, and today I am joined by Councillor Malachy Steenson. Today we'll be discussing the presidential nomination process and possible reform, Dublin City Council and its response to such, hashtag spoil the vote, and the march scheduled for October 4th through Dublin City to the GPO. Okay, so Malachy, well, maybe you want to take us through the presidential nomination process and how it failed to nominate a single independent candidate through the council route.
Well, I think that was the intention of the political establishment, not to allow anybody through. Clearly Simon Harris gave an open and direct order to his councillors, not alone not to nominate anybody, but to frustrate the attempts of anybody to do that. And Micheál Martin done the same, he just didn't do it publicly. And in Dublin City Council, we had, I think, 14 candidates. I can't remember how many actually turned up, but a good chunk of them turned up and were given 5 minutes each to speak, to put forward what they believed in. And then there was 5 minutes in total for each of them for questions and answers, which wasn't enough time. I asked the Lord Mayor to recuse himself from chairing the meeting based on the fact that his political leader had directed him and directed the other Fine Gael councillors in the country to frustrate attempts to select or nominate anybody. A number of the candidates then gave their 5 minutes. Some of them, to be fair, you'd wonder why they were there at all.
Yeah.
Others, you know, when they raised the issue of immigration, say Sarah Louise Mulligan, she was shut down twice by the Lord Mayor and by basically a whole chunk of the council, roaring and shouting at her. And she didn't say anything racist or anything that people would have a concern with. She had simply mentioned, for instance, that a young woman had been viciously attacked in East Wall by somebody who shouldn't have been in the country. Now, a man has been convicted of that, so that's all done and dusted. A man with 27 different aliases, both as a man and a woman, a man who'd been convicted of various different offences in Ireland, England, France, and indeed last year he spent 6 months, I think, in custody in Cork because they couldn't work out who he was. And they ultimately came up with 27 different identities. And then the council, after hearing all of the applicants, decided or had a vote whether they would nominate anybody or not. Now, that vote was entirely predictable. I think there was 9 votes in favour of nominating somebody. Now, ultimately, they probably wouldn't have nominated anybody had they gone through the process. But it was a bit unfair to bring people into a council where where a decision had effectively already been taken to vote down nominating anybody. You know, that was a waste of those applicants' times. And in fact, it was a waste of our time. But, you know, that's what passes for political debate in this country.
It almost sounds a bit like deja vu because the exact same thing seemed to happen in 2018 for the presidential nomination in DCC. I remember being there myself as an observer. I think Sarah Louise Mulligan was there again and also got a very rude response from a lot of the councillors. Peter Casey was there. Gemma O'Doherty was there. Kevin Sharkey was scheduled to be there. I don't think he showed up. But similar thing, 5 minutes to speak, 5 minutes of questions, and then they held a vote not to nominate anyone, which is a waste of people's time. Though certainly a little bit better than Fingal, which I was told that they let them speak for an hour or 2 hours and kept them there and then did the same thing, voted to not have a vote.
Well, I think, you know, if you're allowing people in, 5 minutes for them to make the presentation is good enough, but 5 minutes for potentially 63 councillors to ask them a question and then to reply to that, 5 minutes is not enough.
Yeah.
But I think you mentioned Peter Casey there, and it was interesting that he got through into the race on the last occasion, and I think that's what frightened him because he went from, I think, not really registering a couple of days before, and he put out one comment in relation to travellers, and he ended up on 21%, I think, at the end of it. So they weren't going to let that happen again.
Yeah, that's interesting with Peter Casey as well, that he didn't appear at Dublin County Council or City Council. Have you had any communications from him?
No,
Yeah, so I guess we know he's dropped out, but
He's gone. Well, he's gone now anyway.
yeah.
But I mean, I think he's had very little involvement in this country apart from standing in the odd European election.
Yeah.
Like these people come along and sail in as if they're the saviors of the world, and
I know, yeah. It's very similar to Sean Gallagher, who had very little to do with the country after coming second in the 2011 election, and then he ran again in 2018. I guess it just might say a lot about our nomination process that we have a candidate who came away with nearly 24% of the vote in the 2018 election. The runner-up, the second in the national vote for that election, who seemed to have lost faith and not even attempt to show up and court the councils this time round. Do you think it's been a little bit harder this cycle to get a nomination via the council route, or?
Well, obviously it's been harder this time around because nobody got through. And if you look at Sheridan, got 2 councils, but he was never going to win. And what did he represent?
Yeah.
And somebody who legged it off to America, married, and he has said this, he married his wife in order to get an American passport and stay there. That's a man who, and then comes back here thinking he can run for president. So it's a man who had no loyalty to this country in the first place by taking out American citizenship, and now has no loyalty to America by wanting to come back here. So these are charlatans, most of them.
It's funny how he is the most successful because he was probably the candidate which the councillors knew the least about. Because the more they knew about somebody and they had more of a profile, it seemed to be less likely for them to deliver a nomination.
Well, plus he was no threat in the real race, and he was one of them at the end of the day.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess my other question to you as well is, like, what do we do from here? I saw that Independent Ireland spoke about bringing forth a bill to reform the nomination process. Would this be a case where we would do away with the council nomination, the 20 Oireachtas members entirely, or do we reduce it to maybe 2 council nominations and 10 Oireachtas members?
Well, I think my own view is anybody who wants to stand for president should be allowed. It shouldn't be up to the political class in any way to dictate to the people who they should select. And maybe you have to go through, like they have in some countries, to maybe a couple of different rounds of election so people can be eliminated, and then you end up with
like in France.
Yeah, you end up with 2 or 3 candidates, or in France probably 2 candidates. And that would seem to me to be a better way to go, because you have the political establishment and the whole NGO class and that determining who the candidates are. So as it stands now, it really doesn't matter which of them wins, because they're all the same. They all agree on the key issues that face this country. They may say they don't, but Humphreys, well, it's hard to know what Gavin believes, because he was going to stand, or was asked to stand, for Fine Gael in the last election as or the Francis Fitzgerald seat in Europe.
And rumour has it Aidan O'Riordan approached him for Labour for maybe it was the European election, but he's been approached by a few different parties.
So there's a man with no politics.
Yeah.
Who and it was interesting, an interview with Brendan O'Connor and Leo Varadkar on RTE Radio last week, where Varadkar talks about Gavin, and he talks about how he got him to chair the Citizens' Assembly, and then how he was appointed to the North East Inner City Task Force. Now, I'm a councillor for a year and a half now. I have never met Jim Gavin, and yet he's presiding over a major project or a major funding task force in my constituency. So, and the interesting thing that Varadkar said, and it's interesting from 2 points. One, he says, I thought he was one of ours. Now, that shows that he did think he was one of theirs, but it also showed that he was given those other positions because he was one of ours. Now, I don't think any politicians previously have been so clear and blatant in admitting that. It shows Varadkar became totally disillusioned with what was going on. Because normally they'll say, oh, look, he does this, he was, great team leader and all of that, but there was an open admission from a former Taoiseach that if you're one of ours, you get the job, if you're not, you won't. Yeah,
it'd be interesting to see him on the debate stage. I guess that's what a lot of people were hoping for. If you had somebody like Maria Steen on stage with them, maybe might have caused a lot of damage.
Well, when you look at Maria Steen debating with Micheál Martin during the 2 referendums last year, And there was no way she was going to be allowed to debate with them. Because she'd wiped the floor with them. And, what is there really to debate with them? On housing, for instance, there's no difference between Humphreys and whatever. Nobody knows what. But say between Humphreys and Fianna Fáil, because I'm not sure what Gavin actually thinks. And Catherine Connolly may pontificate about it, but, she's coming from a Marxist, cultural Marxist, liberal, kind of woke attitude to housing and to everything else. So really there's no difference between their policies. Remember, Connolly spent the last Dáil as last Cancorla, So here's somebody who's embedded in the system yet at the same time as claiming to be.
Yeah, like I tried to look up things on Catherine Connolly, like what was her position on, let's say, the hate speech bill. And the only debates that she's included in is when she was last Cancorla and she was standing in and mediating with those debates. So it's very difficult to find out what are her stances on a lot of, I guess, the important issues to Ireland. Basically, it seems to be her image seems to be anti-Western, anti-American, anti-British. Oddly,
I'm not even so sure that there's an anti-British thing, because I've never seen her saying anything about the British occupation of the 6 counties previously.
Okay.
And she's only now talking about that since she's getting the provisionals support. But if you go back to why she left the Labour Party in the beginning, it was only because they wouldn't let her run in Galway. Not because she's any ideological difference with them, and that was a party that was in power with Fine Gael. So these 3 candidates, their parties have all run this country down between them for the past, 100 years or more. So it's very hard to know what any of these politicians actually believe. I mean, she was asked on News Talk the other morning, how many genders are there?
Yeah.
And, and she was asked specifically, are there just 2 genders? Oh, no, there's more than that. Well, how many is there? Well, you can be what you want. Is that somebody really that we want for president?
Yeah. Yeah. We're not really spoiled for choice this time round, which is where I'm going to ask you about hashtag spoil the vote. But what I'd like to get into first is you've spoken off camera to me before about comparing presidential nomination systems around the world. And I think you might have mentioned that it was Mongolia or Turkey have a similar nomination process to Ireland, which wouldn't really be considered bastions of democracy.
No. And they're the countries that we generally, we hate Turkey now at the minute.
Yeah.
And most of those other countries that have those type of systems, North Korea, for instance, that, we don't even have an election. We say that they're not democracies and dictatorships, and they're,
even Trump was joking with Erdogan this week, where he joked to him, says, all about rigged elections, which is a pretty funny back and forth. And that's what's interesting is you've had people like Leo Varadkar, he's recently on the Matt Cooper and Ivan Yates podcast, saying that, this is just how our democracy works. It's in the Constitution. Our founding fathers made it this way. But then I don't think you say the same thing about gay marriage or the abortion referendum or anything like that, which are in the Constitution as well. But for some reason, oddly, he likes the nomination process, and I think we gander a guess to say because it suits it suits his party. Your response to this, you've been a big proponent of hashtag spoil the vote. My kind of take on that is, how do you distinguish between a mistakenly filled out ballot? You see this a lot in the count centres, where you could have, I think, at the European and local election a couple of years ago in 2024, there's over 100,000 spoiled ballots. And how are we going to distinguish between which are going to be the ones in favour of a writing candidate like Maria Steen and ones which are just improperly filled out?
Well, I suppose, if you look at this election, there's only 3 candidates, so that would cut down the mistakes certainly on the ballot paper. And you can look at the previous amounts of spoiled votes, and some of them would have been conscious political spoiling, and others would have been just mistakes and that. And suppose you could take out a small chunk of that and say, right, that's people who just made a mistake. But what we want to drive this is into huge numbers, so that, no question about the reasoning behind why somebody would do it. And if somebody was prepared to vote, for instance, for Maria Steen, write Maria Steen on the ballot paper. If you wanted to vote for Conor McGregor, do the same. If you wanted to vote for Nick Delahunty, do the same. if you weren't really bothered about any of them and are just opposed to the process, then just put an X on it. If you're opposed to government policy on housing, immigration, health, then just write more healthcare, close the borders, or anything at all. And we want to drive this into huge numbers. And we'd said this in Train last year, actually. And we first went public with it on Eddie Hobbs's video, where I said that, you know, if there is not a candidate that we can support, then this is what we'll be doing. And this is not entirely intended for the political audience here or the political establishment. This will be international. And if we can drive this to the levels we want it, that will be the issue of this election. And then you have the issue then whether the president can claim then to represent the nation. And that's the issue.
Interesting. I guess another question I have on that is, with a lot of the other elections, you mentioned like we only have 3 candidates now. To be in the count centres, it used to be, I'd say about 10 years ago, traditionally you still need to have a pass and be connected to a certain candidate or a campaign. Now they tend to be a little bit more strict on who gets into the count centres. Considering we only have 3 candidates, do you have to be associated with one of their campaigns to go into the count centres and be a viewer, or just have a look at the spoiled ballots? Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about it yet, but I know that they have tightened up in recent years. It used to be relatively easy to get tickets. I presume as a councillor that I shouldn't have a problem personally in getting one. But you know, the way we're looking at this is that there's actually 4 candidates now. There's the 3 state candidates, and then there's the spoil your vote. That is a candidate.
Yeah.
And, you know, and some people have said, oh, well, you know, it's a waste of time. Just don't go and vote. If you don't vote, then you're entirely irrelevant.
Yeah.
If you go out and take the trouble to go to your polling station and vote and make your intention and your objection to this system known, that will feed into the system, because, as you know, you get the valid poll, you get how many votes each candidate gets, but you also have the spoil votes. And we want huge numbers. I'm not going to speculate a number because somebody will come back and say, well, you doubled that or you didn't even get half that. So you know, I don't want any soldiers to fortune out there. But we expect, and the traction that it's getting now, bearing in mind that it's 4 weeks out, and this, which is a short campaign on one level, but it's also a long campaign as well, you know.
Yeah. And you have, coming up on the 4th of October, you have a march to the GPO. Would you be pushing hashtag spoil the vote or this campaign along with this march?
Well, we are. I mean, the reason for the rally at this time is to push the spoil your vote. And if you look at the last rally or the rally before that, on the 26th of April, the huge numbers we had out on that, and the whole sea of flags, and that shook this government and the establishment. Despite what people think about rallies don't make any difference, people's presence on the streets is something that this state will take notice of. And you can see, you know, regularly O'Callaghan will come out now and say, oh, we're out there sending 20 people back on a plane. And you're getting that, you know, and I mean, it seems that on the most recent plane that was sent back to Pakistan, it was one of the people who'd been convicted in the grooming gangs in Britain, you know, who's just came over here. And you have them admitting that the majority of people are coming in from England, you know, from the war-torn streets of Birmingham and London, you know, and Keir Starmer may be, you know, not running the place quite well, but I don't think anybody could argue that those people are fleeing war and terror, you know, yet the left continues to tell us they are.
Yeah, I guess it's
and many of them, in fact, are not people coming in on boats from France. They're people who've lived in the UK for decades in some cases. Yeah,
and I guess it's also the fact that they often cross through quite a lot of other countries before they reach the UK, and then now that Keir Starmer is tightening up on immigration there, their next stop is to come over to Ireland. Yeah. So we'll probably have to get a little bit more serious about that as well.
Well, I mean, it's quite simple. You have to check the buses, the trains coming over the border. I mean, and people who say you can't enforce the border on this island, the people who say that most strongly are people who supported the Good Friday Agreement, which sets out very clearly that there is a border on the island and it's a British controlled border.
Yeah. Do you think we could probably enter into an agreement with the British? So the British have a similar agreement that they have with France, where they pay so many billions of pounds a year for the French border police to kind of up their game and stopping the boat crossings.
It's not really working.
It's not really working, which is true. But we don't really have boat crossings coming across the Irish Sea. I don't think we have any at all when it comes to migrants. Maybe we do, but it's not as prominent.
They just come on the ferry.
They just come on the ferry. But do you think that's a runner? Do you think the Irish government can make an agreement with the British government?
Well, firstly, I don't think the Irish government wants to make an agreement. They just want to keep letting people in. And I don't think the British government is interested in an agreement, because they want as many to leave there and come in here, through the north. And it's not in their interests. It's in the interest of the people to do something like that, but the political class are separate to the people.
Yeah. That's definitely interesting. I guess the other thing I wanted to ask you about is, because everything is coloured by the presidential election at the moment, is we have the reaction after Maria Steen announced that she's stepping out of the race. She did not get the requisite 20 Oireachtas votes, only got 18. And then everyone decides to focus on her handbag for some reason, which was a Hermes handbag, cost something like €20,000. Just want to know what your response is to that.
Well, I thought perhaps, like an awful lot of people in my constituency, she may have got her Hermes bag in Turkey or off the Lucky Luckies in Spain. But apparently that's not the case. I mean, I think it's very bad optics, certainly. But at that stage, she was out of the political race. And, it says to people that, she has something that they don't have, and that can create a difficulty in politics particularly. It's not. So it's slightly different if, say, it's Conor McGregor in a fur coat, or
right.
He's not a political figure despite what he thinks. And I think people have a different view of ostentatious wealth from celebrities or footballers and that than they do from the political establishment. I thought the colour was quite nice, if anything, and I thought, with the beige coat, it was kind of a bit like the Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, I've seen some comments from some lefties online going like, don't like Maria Steen, but they are looking a bit dapper. So yeah, I'll give that to them.
But I mean, I see some of the left who complained about it most, like Ruth Coppinger and that, for instance. I tweeted previously when people commented on her that, talk politics, don't be talking about image and all of this, So
don't be speaking on women's fashion and all that.
But there is on the left particularly, and remember, most of these people who pontificate to us on the left either work in the universities or work for an NGO or work for a government party or an opposition party, or work somewhere within the system. They don't work in the real world. They're paid by the taxpayer.
Yeah,
and they have. And I suppose Maria Steen and her husband are fairly successful business people. She comes from a wealthy background.
She qualified barrister, architect.
I'm not so sure that she practices. But
I don't think, she hasn't since she's had her first child, apparently. But certainly it does seem to be doing well enough to, be able to afford a bag like that, I guess.
They would have no problem with all of that, I think, if Maria Steen wasn't a Catholic.
Oh, okay.
And she probably would have got led into the race if she wasn't a Catholic.
Yeah.
Because don't they tell us, that women should be successful, should be articulate, should be striking, should be well dressed, and all of these things that she is, except she's a Christian and she's a Catholic, and that's therefore she has to be taken down. Yeah,
I guess you could probably call those double standards there. I suppose the final thing I wanted to ask you,
not the right kind of woman.
Yeah,
but I suppose it's very good that these people were able to recognise that it was a handbag. I'm wondering how they recognised that it was on a woman's arm.
Okay,
considering that they don't know what a woman is.
Exactly.
Anytime they're asked.
Well, I guess the other thing I wanted to ask you about is you announced at the last rally that you had in Dublin about working towards a new organisation, new party called Grá na Héireann. Seeing there's some Twitter pages of being set up, seem to be connected with the march, the one on October 4th. Anything you want to tell us about Grá na Héireann, how it's coming on?
Well, it's coming along well. We've had meetings right around the country, and this rally in next week on the 4th of October, is being run under the banner of Grana Heron. Now, whether ultimately that's the name we use, we haven't decided yet. Probably it will be, I think. And our Spoil Your Vote campaign has been run under Grana Heron as well. And I think that name sums up exactly what we are and what we want, love of Ireland. And if, people have a problem with that, well, there's an airport there, the same as the people who have a problem with our flag and our country,
Yeah.
find another country.
Yeah.
And, if you look at the huge success of the Flags project, which on our end of it was done under Grana Heron, and there are now communities all over the country, independent of anybody, who are putting flags up in their own house and their own streets. And that's what we want people to do. We don't want, we're not demanding that people are even asking people to take over a whole village and do it. But if everybody just does their own street, one or two people on the street or on a road, do their road, that
and I do see a lot of comments coming out from a lot of the commentariat saying that this is thuggish behaviour, this is trying to intimidate foreign nationals or whatever. There's nothing to say that they could be proud of that flag as well.
But they despise that flag. You see,
it's the commentariat who don't like it. It's, I think, to them they see it as being a bit backwards. It might just be that during the World Cup, the communities that fly the flags most proudly tend to be working class, and it's definitely there's a big sense of classism there.
You see, the tricolour is the flag of the nation. The pride flag is now the flag of the state.
Yeah.
And if you even look, cultural night there the other day, I think last Friday, there was some performance in Leinster House, and the windows are now just pride flags. If you go into any school, it's a pride flag you'll see, not a tricolour. And that says, and I think John McGurk may have been writing about this, or somebody recently, that the state, if you have the pride flag in your school, for instance, or in, if you get something, go onto the revenue website, it's the pride flag. You go onto the court service, police cars are painted, buses. That says we are part of the state and we conform with the state. Whereas if you fly a tricolour, now you're saying we are the nation.
Yeah.
We don't subscribe to what the state is doing.
Exactly.
And that's the difference. And that's why they're afraid, and they are shocked and stunned. I mean, these people who complain about our flags flew a hula hoop with a Palestinian flag onto the top of the spire yesterday. I don't see councillors in Dublin City now demanding that be removed, and they probably object to it being removed.
Yeah, and I doubt we wouldn't have the same reaction going, oh, it's thuggish. We wouldn't say it's marking territory or it's to intimidate. We know that those are flags which are important to them, but then their response is seeing the tricolours. They go, oh, this is this lowbrow working class thing, and we're more sophisticated and international, and really look down at it. They're having the reaction, I'd say, everyone expected them to have.
Yeah, well, when I touched on this on Eddie's programme last week, I made a point that we knew exactly how they would react, and as Labour Councillor Moriarty on News Talk admitted that we had set a trap for them and they'd walk straight into it.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd done it at the time. We'd done it because silly season in the media. We knew, and we knew. You see, these people are very easy to wind up. And for them, it's, if you don't agree with them, for instance, 100% on Palestine, then you're the enemy. And most people agree with Palestine, but they don't believe that, it should take over politics here.
Yeah.
And the only reason, for instance, that the government parties are interested in Palestine is to try and take the rug from under the left. And we had the same with Ukraine, and we had the same with, I think Irish people want politicians in this country to sort out this country before they start trying to sort out the problems of the world. And they're using that world politics to distract themselves. Look at Micheál Martin all week in the UN. Simple Simon over there as well. These people, want to be patted on the back, and they're as ineffective over there as they are in this country. So perhaps they should stay over there.
Good way to put it. Well, I'm sure that those who are not happy to see the Irish flag on October 4th will not be impressed by the Sea of Irish Flags, which will be marching to the GPO through Dublin. I think we might leave it there, Malachy. Thank you very much for joining me. And
Thanks, Alex.
yeah, thank you very much. This has been Ireland Reports, and good evening.